everyone.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Just waiting for everyone to come online. Everyone, it's Nathan here, joined with Ridwan from One Path Accountants today. Just talking about the budget. So we wanted to come live yesterday, but it was too early to have our Tuesday night chats, so we thought we'd come live with our Wednesday night chats. So yeah, with it, hi to everyone. Thanks a lot for tuning in and watching us. So it's that time of the year again where they do a budget and lots of interesting things out there. I called it the pre-hyperinflation budget, which
Or we could call it the big spender.
big spender. So how cool is it? No, we're living in a
Yeah, it was unique in the sense that we had a budget last October with the pandemic in place. They pushed back 2020's budget, so we've had two budgets pretty close back to back, and they've been big ones. And I'm always the first one to put my hand up when I'm wrong. We had a pre-budget analysis a couple of weeks ago, and given the fact that the economy is doing so well, and well, quote unquote, doing so well, I thought it was going to be more of an austerity budget, and I think that was mainly what the consensus was. But the leak started to happen that it was going to be a big one, and by golly, was it a big one. So they had about $160 billion worth of debt they were going to issue, new measures as a deficit that was going to come up in place. That came back because of a little bit of good luck, fortune with regard to the iron ore prices and a few other things about how the economy has recovered. So the net debt for this year, or the net deficit for this year, is about 102. So it's about $50 billion better than what they expected.
do you remember when in the 1990s, the recession everyone had to have, there was $98 billion worth of debt from the Paul Keating government. And it took the whole Howard and Costello government, the whole 10, 12 years, whatever it took, to clean up that 98 billion. And here we are just going, it's 50 billion better than what we thought it was.
So as a quick measure, the net debt is expected to increase to 617 billion accrued, which is about
How much is it again?
617 billion. And that's about 30% of GDP, so it is better than what they expected. But by 2025, they expect it to be about $1 trillion, maybe a little bit more, 1.2 trillion potentially. So by 2025, we will see something that we've never seen before, which is a record amount of debt.
Well, it is already.
In the sense that we knew that we were going to come up with this amount of debt, we thought things would recover a little bit better than they could have. They've done really well, but at the same time, we're going to be in a position where I think that might be bigger. I think in the last budget update we had, you said it's going to be 2 trillion or 3 trillion. So
we're on track.
We're getting close, but we're not quite there yet. That being said, it's been a good year for the Australian economy with all things considered. The Australian economy outperformed every other OECD economy that there was post-pandemic. So we think that potentially there's light at the end of the tunnel. Josh Frydenberg thinks there's a huge light at the end of the tunnel and how to come out of it. But I still think, to your point, Nathan, is that the debt burden is going to be just something that kind
of... It's amazing. It's amazing. This isn't your problem with the debt. Like, I've been in trouble in my life. You have hurdles and adversity that comes your way or whatever. And the reason why I've been so happy in the last 12 months is that when I've had an issue, it's like, well, it's lonely, right? It's lonely. When you've got an issue, it's personal, you've got your own problems, whatever. But this is a problem that's too big for everybody, right? There's not just anybody that could fail. It's not that we're talking about a property market here. I did some videos the other day which will come out. Yes, I am growing a mullet, trying to grow a bit of a mullet. Don't hate me for it.
Please don't encourage you.
Just the comments are disappearing. But yes, growing a mullet. I did some videos the other day just on some of the costings that are out there. So if we look at copper, per pound of copper, I think they counted in pounds, it's like $5 per pound. That's up 2.5 times in the last 6 months. If we look at lumber prices in the last 12 months, so timber has gone up from $250 to $1,600. That's gone up 6 times in the last 12 months. Iron ore has doubled. Everything's just going up with mad inflation, and that's just due to the level of of inflation and money printing that's going out there that's causing the inflation that we're seeing, which is amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, so look, iron ore, topically was part of the budget measures in place, how they're going to look at clawing back that deficit. So effectively, iron ore's jumped in price, it's just going bananas. I think it was 50% up this week or this month alone.
And gas.
It's $230 US for what they sell. And I think it's $10 US that if the price increases, it adds $1.3 billion to the government's coffers. So a lot of the budget estimates, a lot of the budget, forecasting is based around iron ore, is based around quicker economic recovery. Now, it's hard to see whether or not that will be the case. Nathan actually brought up a pretty good point to me, I think a week and a half ago, where in the 1920s it was called the Roaring Twenties.
Yeah.
And Josh Frydenberg must have used the word roaring about 10 times last night.
Really?
He did. He said Australia's roaring back into the.
We all know what happened after the
2021.
Roaring Twenties.
And exactly right. So effectively, what happens is that economic indicators can tell us with some certitude what's happening or what's happened in the past, what we're looking for going forward. But the lag indicators for economic conditions are always hard to measure. So what they said for the Roaring Twenties and the subsequent depression in 1929 was actually started in 10 years earlier than that with the 1919 Spanish influenza. So
surprise.
So all those things caught up, and then economically they had a really big problem, 10 odd years later.
I think I've said this from day one, that it will be the cure that is the problem. It's not the problem that's at hand. So it's all this money that they're printing, or so-called money, which is currency, which is causing inflation. Like everything, like we were sitting here a year ago or 6 months ago when they did the budget, we're laughing our head off, going, we're on track for $1 trillion worth of debt. They've printed more than $1 trillion. Like they're saying 675,000 worth of deficit. Billion, sorry. We've got over $1 trillion worth of programs that have come out in the last 12 months. And that's without using any sort of fractional reserve banking and that money flowing through the economy via trickle-down economics, or whether someone gets 50 grand of money or currency, and then they take that 50 grand and go and use it as a 20% deposit to buy another 250 grand worth of property. So then there's 200 grand worth of extra money that's printed as an IOU and given out and put through the economy. That's why we're seeing so much inflation. And there was something, I noticed a comment here from Simon saying, trying to look younger about my mullet. I don't know, I just felt like growing a mullet, really, just for a laugh, really. But I remember a couple of years ago when we did the mentoring program, and I was very bullish, and I said to everybody in there, I didn't go out public and say it about buying in the mining areas, because I say something and everyone thinks, oh, we best go out and buy mining areas. But I said it to insiders, and I said we would see the largest mining boom of our lifetime, and we have seen commodities rise to all new time highs. And that's having a flow-on effect to mining towns. I didn't actually buy in the mining towns because I wasn't in a position to at the time. However, ever since then, I bought all the other infrastructure in the mining towns, the motels, the shops, the car yards, everything. So yeah,
you'll be pleasantly surprised, although I'm not a drinking man.
Yeah.
There's a part of the budget called Cheers for Beers, because they're giving incentives to distilleries and businesses which actually serve alcohol. Try and give them incentives to keep them going. So that's part of the budget. Not something we'll cover today, but
we need to look at that for all the pubs. All the pubs. Ridwan's not touching the pubs. Neither am I, but I'm buying them. It's like...
So there's targeted extended recovery plans for aviation, tourism, hospitality, regional towns which are suffering. That being said, they have said something pretty impactful, which is that the borders probably will remain closed largely until mid-2022. And that means that local regional tourism probably will go through another burst like it did last year, which is great for our towns that are in the regional areas and looking for more business.
It's great for the Birch Hotel Group too.
The Birch Hotel Group might catch a few visitors, which is fantastic. So it is one of those things where I think the Australian economy of itself has done really well. We've done well largely because we're a small little open economy. We've managed everything well. The virus hasn't been as devastating as it has been in other countries. We haven't had to shut down we have, but not in such an extensive way in recent times.
And we weren't burdened with debt when we came into this situation.
Correct, absolutely.
We are now.
Yeah.
We are
Very good
now.
point.
It's great.
But the debt is cheap now.
It's
right?
so great.
And so it's very
It's
unusual.
cheap.
It's very unusual for a coalition government, so Conservative government, to onboard debt. Usually, what they say is small government, big business. They get out of the way, and they try and make sure that private enterprise and the free market economy can handle what is to be the inefficiencies within the market. However, this time they've actually come in and said, "Here's all this money. It's on your plate," right? And there is a big part of the economic and I guess the forecasting cohort or community who's saying how we're going to get out of the debt. There's no real good plan as yet. So the major plan that they have in terms of spurring on the economy is jobs, right? So we talked about that back in October, where it was the jobs related, job maker, job seeker, job keeper, job trainer, job maker. Did I say job maker? Yeah, job maker.
All of them, house builder, home builder.
Everything, right? They're all there. And so it was all jobs related. At the moment, our unemployment rate's about 5.6, 5.5%. They're looking to try and get it down another 1% to 4.5 or lower.
They say those numbers, but really they've taken people that weren't employed, put them as students, packaged them up under the job seeker because they're training in education, job trainer, and now they're not unemployed, they're getting training, so they're in a qualified training program.
Yeah, look, I mean, systemically and historically, 4 or 5% of unemployment is what an economy aims for.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at trying to push up wages, and so the only way to do that, which is a fantastic ploy, is to get more people in work, and that helps people from a lower socioeconomic point of view to buy housing or get into the housing market. That could be to engage in meaningful work from an economy point of view. So it all really works, I think, fantastically, and something that haven't done really well to date. So I think it is a good plan. What that does to the property market, what that does to the equity market, what that does to crypto, alternate assets, we don't know. If you suddenly chop down the unemployment rate by a further 20%, that's a lot of jobs, right? I think we have 2 million people unemployed. So, do the math, 400,000 people back in the workforce. To your point there, Sydney's going to have a housing shortage, right?
We've got Centrelink for everybody now. Centrelink for the whole of Australia. I feel like Frydenberg should be like Oprah Winfrey, like, you get Centrelink, you've got Centrelink, everybody's getting Centrelink. Free money for everyone.
There is a lot of free helicopter money going. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of measures there for, I guess, our community and the community that Nathan sort of works with and I work with. There isn't a whole amount there for property investors. There's a lot of there for property ownership, right?
Yeah.
So there's an extension to what is the First Home Super Saver Scheme. So before we make voluntary contributions into your super fund, to effectively be able to store it in your super fund and then pull it out when you need it for a first home. Yeah. That's gone from 30,000 to 50,000, right?
Because you're going to need it.
Well, you're certainly going to need it, and it kind of is useless, to be honest, within the Sydney market. So 50 grand doesn't get you a whole amount, maybe other than stamp duty. They have not extended the home builder package. They have smoothed out the process on which the home builder package can take place.
I've got a funny story.
Please.
So I was talking to someone the other day, and they're builders, right? Someone that sells land. The builders now can't actually get supplies, so they can't get their hands on toilets, windows, all the fixtures and fittings, and the costings are going up. So builders are going broke, even though they're at the busiest time of their life.
So what they said is the whole world is renovating. So there's a really good current dichotomy which is occurring in the States, where lumber, to your point, has gone up folds and folds and folds in terms of money. I don't know the exact amount, but
it's gone up 6 to 7 times in the last year.
Yeah, retail, right?
From 250 a broad foot. I think they class it as, it's weird shit that they class it in the US, but $250 per broad feet, or 10,000 broad feet or something. It's now $1,600.
Yeah.
So it's gone from 250 to 1,600.
But interestingly enough, for the lumber farmers, or those guys, whatever you want to call them, they haven't had any increase in their raw materials.
Yeah.
Right?
Because it's all paper contracts.
Yeah.
It's all fake.
And so they've had, over the last 17 years, very little when it comes to changes in the actual price of their raw material, but increases in wages, costs, fuel, everything, tax. So there is two-speed folds occurring. And it is one of those things where I think the Australian economy needs to be really acutely aware that there can be those kind of things bubbling under the surface,
Yeah.
where things like JobKeeper, JobMaker, JobTrainer have held us through this period, and what happens when they come to an end, what happens when those economic indicators come home to roost, right?
I think we're just at the start of it.
It's going to be interesting. As you said, it's a good time to be alive.
It's so exciting.
All right, so a quick couple of updates that a lot of people would be interested in is personal taxation. So what they call is the Lamington, so low and middle income tax offset for 2022, as in the tax year they're about to roll into, is being retained. It was actually meant to be ending this year, but because they don't really have any slated tax cuts until 2023, 2024, 25, when stage 3 is meant to come in, they're extending it. So basically what they're doing is they're giving everyone another free $1,080. And if you're a couple, then obviously double that. So do what you will, make of what you will with that. It's not much, but it's something they've got to give everyone. For some people, it is a lot. But what you want to see out of a government is to say, okay, hey, we're giving you tax cuts with the incentive to spend it. But what we've found through the pandemic is that people are saving it, right? So they don't have any real mechanism to say, hey, spend the money, except to give you more. If they give you more, they assume that what's in your pockets are full. As the cash is falling out, you go, okay, well, I've got to spend it. It's in my wallet, right?
Yeah.
So that's the idea. So that's the dangerous part of this budget.
We haven't seen the velocity of this currency yet. So
I think you're going to do a velocity.
I'm going to do a velocity, just a video.
Yeah, video, sorry.
Yeah. So basically the velocity of money is that the money is staying very stagnant. The currency is not moving around, sloshing around in the economy. When people start realizing that their currency is worthless, like obviously our viewers here understand how it works, our investors understand how it works, but the whole country and the whole world haven't really clicked onto the fact that they can't buy as much as what they used to. And when they start realizing that inflation is rampant, it creates a greater velocity, meaning that the money is changing hands more and more. And when that money is moving around more and more in the system, it goes faster and faster, and therefore cost of goods go up a lot higher. So we have one aspect of the inflation, which is printing the currency more out there in the money in the system sloshing around, but the velocity of it, that's where the real fun is going to come. And that's why in March 2020, I said to everybody that we would start to see inflation, but we wouldn't see it for about 3 years. From 3 years to 7 years is when we would start seeing the real hyperinflation, and we're starting to get into that period at the moment, but we're not there yet. So.
Yeah, do you want to explain what velocity of money is?
So in short, if I'm out there and I'm a taxi driver, let's say, and this is, I think Mike Maloney did a video on this where he basically, if I'm a taxi driver, if I'm a taxi driver, you hop in my cab, and you tip me $1. I then go and take that dollar and I go and spend that on petrol. The petrol attendant has more cash flow coming through. They might get more else in their salary. They'll take that, go and buy themselves some food. If there's more people that money is changing hands with, the quicker it changes hands, the more disregard for the currency that people have. So we're heading into a time very rapidly where people are starting to lose confidence in their currency. And I think when we look at stuff like cryptocurrency, people ask me about crypto and my thoughts on that nowadays. Like if we look at things like Dogecoin and all that sort of shit, right? There's a big scam out there. I'm not even going to get started on Dogecoin or anything like that at the moment. But the reason why these markets, it's very interesting that all these markets are completely tied together. So when I see the gold market crash, you instantly overlay it with the stock market and with Bitcoin prices, you will start seeing it go down, and then we start seeing it go back up. It's like, who is pulling the levers at the back end? Why is the liquidity getting sucked from all markets? That's a question for another day. But people are like, when we start seeing cryptocurrencies go up so high, people are going to be like, why would I have my money in the bank? I want to have them in cryptocurrencies. And that creates a whole new market that will be inflated away, and a lot of inflation goes into these markets, and then people have more liquidity, and it's very exciting, very, very exciting to see the level of the velocity that we're seeing at the moment. So,
which is effectively what Nathan's trying to say is effectively what they're trying to do with the budget. They're trying to create so much downward force on wages that everyone's employed,
Yeah.
the jobs market starts to become more competitive. So if Nathan wants to hire someone, he can't just hire someone for 50 grand. He's actually got to go hire for someone for $60,000, right? So that inflation is what we need to get moving. It's not moving.
But we're already seeing massive inflation. But the CPI index, right? The CPI, everyone hears about the CPI, but it's the real big CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. They're removing stuff like the meat. You would have had like a nice big piece of steak in the CPI index back in the 70s, but now they're going, oh, here's a can of Spam. That's what we're basing the meat value off, and it's artificially suppressing.
The basket of goods, they haven't really looked at what that basket of goods is for a long, long while.
How can you say we've got everything is at 1% inflation or 1.5% inflation?
Yeah.
Right? Everything's gone up by the 1%. Tell me one thing. This is what I encourage everyone to do at the moment. I can't see Instagram because the camera's too far away, but with Facebook, maybe just right there, can you tell me something that you haven't seen go up in the last year? There you go. What hasn't gone up by at least 1% last year?
Petrol's expensive now.
Everything's gone up. Cost of everything. Let's see the messages come through. Nothing's come through yet.
How's your birthday today?
It's not my birthday today, no. My birthday is next week. Next Tuesday, I think, maybe. The 18th. What's the day? Yeah.
And today's the 12th.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
Well, happy birthday for them.
Thank you.
There's a few things that would impact a lot of people, including myself, including a lot of young families. Changes to childcare subsidies from July 1 to childcare subsidies to change in July 2022. So basically, the rate at which they give you your childcare subsidy is going to change pretty significantly.
What's happened there?
So basically, there's an increase in childcare subsidies available for families with one or more children in childcare. So if you do have more than one child in childcare and one's age under 5, there's an additional 30% point subsidy for every second child that you have and every third child. So they're also increasing the amount which, over time, they're going to do it. The amount of money which the threshold test in terms of how much the subsidy you receive is going to continue to climb to be able to encourage people, and especially women, to get back into the workforce, right? So what they're trying to effectively do, again, get people into the workforce.
So if the money was, just seeing someone said, my salary, my savings haven't gone up.
It's very, very expensive, unfortunately.
I've seen here one that said, building materials, they've gone up more than 1%. The timber, no, I said what hasn't gone up by 1%. What hasn't gone up by 1%?
Your salary, that's exactly right.
Exactly. So everything else has gone up. But your assets have gone up, your cash flow has gone up from those assets. So that's why I'm saying, and I've been saying well before this time that we entered into, is that it's about the assets that you control. Remember that told me how to chat, and I said the debt will become your asset?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I what?
You actually made a really good point, is that the banks need to issue more debt. It's the only income stream they have.
That's
well, not the only, but it's a pretty significant income stream that they have.
Yeah.
So that was actually a really good point, which I didn't think about until that time. So
when we look at the childcare subsidies, so if you had, let's just, without being sexist or anything here, we're just saying mum stays at home and minds the kid. Are we allowed to say that today in the world? Like maybe we'll get banned on Facebook for saying that. But anyway, let's say that mum is at home babysitting the kid and, she's on job seeker, right? Or the government's having to support her by being at home. Now what they're doing is they're saying, you go to work, you get off our books, right? And we will hide the unemployment by paying money off a JobKeeper style package to a childcare centre, reinflate that industry, and therefore it's an incentive for a mother to go and go back to work and have that JobKeeper come through via their childcare.
Yeah, so it is an indirect subsidy to be able to encourage additional working provisions and to push down that unemployment rate. So a lot of what we're seeing in this budget isn't direct helicopter money. It's indirect spending. So $15.2 billion in infrastructure spending, $17.1 billion to, NDIS aged care, $3 or $4 billion to things, like changes in R&D and there's subsidies for biotechs and all these other different types of industries. So it's indirect money which is flowing in, which is meant to come down and come back down to the jobs, right? So whether or not we agree with how it should be, I think it's a pretty good budget.
I think it's amazing. Just keep printing more money. Like I've seen people, financial commentators, going out there. Oh, this is a tragedy. This is killing our children's future. Our financial future is like wrecked, and all this sort of stuff. Well, it depends on what spectrum of the field you are playing on. So, if you are concerned about debt, well then yes. But when you realise that the system is based upon this, if you are a large company or you're a large investor or whatever the case may be, this debt bubble that they're building is amazing, because the only way that they can ever pay off this debt as a government or as a person is to devalue the value of that debt. So if they make the debt worthless, then suddenly it's not that big of a problem. They have to rub it out at some point.
So they need to either do one of two things, which is what we've spoken about for a long time, is that you've got a house in Hunters Hill that you bought 20 years ago.
Oh. Maybe I do.
Well, that's true. For 800 grand.
Yeah.
So 20 years ago, 800 grand was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, what's that house worth, Nathan?
I don't know. 4 mil.
Maybe more. So how's the Bella Vista worth 4 mil? What are you talking about?
Okay. 6 mil.
6 mil. So that 800 grand, had you not paid $1 of debt off,
It's nothing.
it's meaningless.
Yeah.
So the economy, in terms of Australian context, they want the same thing to happen, that it grows to such an extent that $1 trillion worth of aggregate debt is a small representation of what we.
So if you have debt and then you have asset, doesn't matter whether it's a used bicycle, doesn't matter whether it's an old mobile phone, doesn't matter if it's a timber table, whatever that asset is, that will get inflated as well. So you could take an old ruler and go and sell it and pay out a mortgage. That's where we're heading.
That'd be nice. I don't know if we're getting it that far, but maybe one day.
Maybe a few of the old computers lying around or something like that.
But conceptually, it's the same thing, that over time, inflation erodes debt.
Your debt becomes irrelevant with inflation.
Correct. Yeah. So that's the old adage that, if you hold something for long enough, then the debt becomes meaningless. So wheat prices, corn, barley. You're absolutely right. So all commodities, rare earth commodities, have all gone up except gold
and silver.
And silver, to be honest with you. So quickly back to some of the personal effects of the budget. There were, again, very few elements which impacted property investors, but more homeowners. So negative gearing, capital gains tax, a couple of years ago was, going to be on the target list or the hit list for any future governments. That's obviously been left unchanged. The family home guarantee for single parents. Essentially, that is that, I don't know where they get the numbers from, but 10,000 single parents is obviously a lot more than that, will be able to purchase a home with as little as 2% deposit over the next 4 years, right? So it's a very crazy idea, fantastic for the people who are struggling, who need a home, but the number of 10,000 single parents is ridiculous. There's probably 10,000 single parents in...
If I was married and had kids and all that sort of stuff, I'd be like, wife, let's get divorced. Let's go buy a property each. It's cheap. Imagine that. Imagine how many people are going, I'm going to get divorced over this. Just look at it. Bill Gates. You think that's not a move? That's a move. Surely it's a move. Bezos, that's a move.
I don't mind Bill Gates. I know you don't like him.
I'm not a fan of him at all. Just throwing it out there.
So the first home super saver scheme, as I mentioned to you, that's expanding from 30,000 to 50,000. So any of our clients who are in that position where they're looking to buy their first home, and they are using that scheme to be able to access that, I think it's not bad. I think they should actually go further with it and allow voluntary contributions, to be a lot more than what they've got. But it is what it is. So it is a step in the right direction. There will be, at some point in the future, a discussion whether or not super can be used to be put towards your first home. And to use your words, crack open your super and put it into the property market. If that happens, it's going to be crazy.
Whatever they can do, like this, the property is not going up. Everyone's sitting there going, oh, Nathan, these property prices are going up. Oh, we're a hero. We bought a property. No, right? You said about the Hunters Hill, right? If you bought a property for 800 grand and you were paying 8% interest, let's just call it 10% interest rate, that's 80 grand a year. But if you got a $6 million loan now on your $6 million property in Hunters Hill, and the interest rate is 2%, now you're paying 120 grand. The interest is still very similar, but it's just that the debt component of it's been inflated away. They're just manipulating every area of the property market to try and keep this Ponzi scheme alive. So I have said that the property market is a Ponzi scheme, But it's not the property market that's a Ponzi scheme, because it would be your food that is a Ponzi scheme. It would be everything else that's out there: secondhand cars, clothing, electrical goods. Everything's in this Ponzi scheme. So what common denominator do we have with everything that we're talking about here? It is the currency that we are using, and it's being manipulated, and it's fraud. Like, if any of us tried to do it, we'd end up in a cage for 10 years or so, which would be kidnapped and put into a cage and locked away. And
Nathan and I love each other. We don't share the exact same philosophy on
well, if we printed money.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But in terms of the government trying to manage the economy, yes, they use monetary and fiscal policy to be able to try and manage that. And to some extent, this budget here shows you that when you run out of options, you've got to print money. Right, and that's the reality. So the RBA has been saying it for a long time: jobs. They've obviously gone into a pretty, I would say, aggressive mode where the interest rates are, 0.1%. They're going in and buying a lot more of bonds, and to be able to try and increase liquidity or maintain liquidity. The US is doing the same thing. They approved their $1.9 trillion package over there. So
they've got $6 trillion now. They've just printed.
Okay.
Approved $6 trillion.
So it's just gobsmacking amounts of money, which they're printing, right? Because we've run out of real options, effectively. So there are some downsides to it, obviously. There's some upsides to it, as you've been discussing.
That's amazing.
But it is something that every individual needs to make sure that they obviously get the right advice with regards to what they do. Just a couple of quick more property elements. The new home guarantee. So the first home lenders, it's a long acronym, but basically the new home scheme is going to be launched last year, and they're expanding to additional 10,000 places for the upcoming year. So first home buyers seeking to build a new home or purchase a newly built home will do so on a 5% deposit, right? So these are the things that we saw back in probably around the Olympics time. 5% deposits, no percent deposits, 100% lending, gearing. So whilst there were changes in the financial lending landscape, which has redacted a lot of that leading up to the 2017 handbrake that was pulled, we're sort of heading back down that path where they really want to underpin the economy with a lot of housing-related economic activity, right?
So everybody uses their house as an ATM machine.
Yeah, often they do, absolutely. So with the housing market being so integral to all the other flow-on effects, so tradies, utes, everything that we topically talk about, but it's even more than that. So, the financial services sector, even things like us, so the white-collar professionals, for example, transactions, lawyers doing conveyancing, wills, all these things, they're all underpinned by that type of activity.
The furniture shop getting more lounges sold.
Precisely, right? So it's one of those things where if you don't underpin it with housing, and Australia's been so obsessed with housing for so long, and you pull that rug out, that's when it's a real panic attack.
So for all those that are doomsaying and going, the market's going to crash and all that sort of stuff, they've shown their hand that it's impossible for them to do it. They just keep printing. They just keep printing and printing.
For the minute, they're keeping printing. That's exactly right. So for some of you who have elderly parents or parents who are aging, heading in towards retirement, there was a pretty cool change to the superannuation downsize scheme. That was previously was 65-year-olds. If they sold their home, they were able to put in $300,000 apiece. So if you have your parents living together, that's $600,000 into super. They've chopped that down to 60. So 60 is quite young, to be totally fair, right? So what they're trying to do with that measure there is say, well, okay, it's encouraging for people to pick up $600,000 of what is tax-free principal place of residence money. What are they going to do with it? The often problem is that they might not want to buy, they might not want to be able to spend that much. So throw it into super. You throw it into super and you're in pension phase, or you're heading towards pension phase at 65, 67, then it'll be tax-free at that point anyway, but you can pull it out. So you can put it into super, and so your superannuation balances can be a lot higher.
Does it have to be a principal place, or could it be an investment? Okay.
It has to be a principal place of residence, right? It doesn't mean you can't move into another principal place of residence, but
so if I had 200 of them,
if
and I move, and I was to go and move from the first one for the first year, and for 6 months, sell it, and then move to my next one, 6 months, sell it.
So I think you'll find that it's a limited
Okay.
Yeah, so you can do it once.
Always like to push the boundaries.
Once in your lifetime.
This is a random question. So.
So those are the main impacts that they've had for property, and the reason that they're not pumping property more is because the property prices have changed significantly since October last year till May this year. So they don't want to stoke that fire too quickly. They want it to be a long burn.
Yeah.
So I actually had a chat with one of the guys we do a lot of work with at CBA, and he said that there's been some undercurrents where CBA might be tightening their measures, and I've heard that from other banks as well.
Yeah.
So macro-prudentially, they're going to try and slowly lift those handbrakes up again, very slowly. Like, when you hear a handbrake click, 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 click,
Yeah.
they're probably going to get to the first notch, and then if it keeps going, second notch, third notch. So that's what we might find. And people who are looking to upsize their home, or they're looking to be able to change their circumstance, whether in an apartment, for example, or new homeowners, they're all going to be the beneficiaries of these type of schemes and the bank's money, effectively.
You're not the first person that's mentioned about the tightening of finance at the moment. Obviously, if they put up the interest rates, that'd be the best thing that they could do to try and stop the market from going crazy. They put up the interest rates, the government will die, business will die, everybody will die. So they've got to try and limit it somehow. They're going through the banks. The lending criteria should have been better. If you remember, Frydenberg said a year ago that by March 2021, they would see overhaul of APRA and it would revert to pre-APRA. Well, it's only getting tougher. Right? And it's bank imposed. So just interesting to take note of that. And I think the top end of town worth of properties, I think that's where people should be very cautious. I see people out there spending $1 million just on a property for the fun of it. And it's like those things are now loaded up with a lot of downside risk. It's like buying Bitcoin at $80,000. At $2,000, it was a great buy. At $80,000, what's the chance it could go up? What's the chance it could come down?
For sure.
Risk is cooked in it. So.
And what you're finding now is that a lot of change in property prices is land driven as opposed to house driven. So I have a chat with builders who are my clients all the time. They're saying that flipping the land is equally as profitable now as just building a house on it and the time lag that you have with that.
Who'd want to build?
Who'd want to build?
Who'd want to build? It's too
expensive.
time consuming, too expensive.
So a couple of quick other changes that might be important for a lot of the clients who follow Nathan and who invest or have diversified assets. So there's now a new bright line test with regards to residency. So before, the residency tests were 4-pronged, they were quite complicated. So now they're trying to simplify and modernize that test. So it's basically what they call a bright line 183-day rule. So if you're here for more than 183 days, you're a tax resident. If you're not, it's more complex than this, but there's a bright line concept. If you're not, then you might not be a tax resident for tax purposes, right? Okay. And sometimes that can help. So, I have a couple of clients who, and I'm not advocating this, but they've got significant holdings where they might consider leaving the country in order to sell those holdings and then come back, right? So there's always these tests and these ruse tests and all these other different types of things which were in place. So this is trying to simplify that, effectively trying to have a more mobile, economy effectively as well. So the last little bit of it was that self-education expenses. Not that everyone has a lot of self-education expenses, but the thresholds for that are changing. The COVID measures in place in terms of work from home are all still intact. Again, there's no changes to negative gearing. There's no changes to capital gains tax. Conversely, they're looking at spending a lot more money on infrastructure. So they're trying to push out projects across the country. So what will be really key for all of our viewers and all of our clients to look for is the local and state government budgets as well. They're often overlooked, but they're really critical to your infrastructure spends because a lot of it is in partnership with the federal government.
So in short, just getting back to our velocity of money talk beforehand, if you had a tradie and they're doing it really well, right? They've got a new glossy white Hilux ute. The guy at the Toyota dealership or girl from the Toyota dealership now is making commission, so they're going down and buying new furniture. The person at the furniture shop's making commission. They're going down and buying more food and going to the restaurant and all that sort of stuff. If the market tightens up, what we will see is that these Hiluxes will go back to where they came from. The tradies do not need them. The furniture salespeople don't make money. The economy dries up. Basically what we saw from 2016 to about 2019, which due to said illness, we have now got a lot of currency creation, and things are back on track. So how great that was for the currency manipulation in this circumstance. Looking at, if the market cannot support that, they've got to find other ways to keep the tradie in his white new shiny ute.
Yeah, sure.
So if there's no concreters building new houses anymore because there's not enough demand for that, the government will start doing some communism spending, and they will do state-owned projects, which they will need to call in these people and print money, build a bridge. Guy gets it for building the bridge, goes buys furniture, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and look, that's absolutely right, most of it, in terms of what the government attitude is. So it's monetary theory, where the government picks up the slack in the economy, and especially in the unemployment market, pushes out projects, creates projects to be able to get people employed, eventually can step away because the economy is running well enough, right? Yeah. So it's being put to the test. I don't think it's really necessarily a bad thing, but one of the big ones that you were looking at was the Inland Rail that's going. They tipped in another 500 million towards that. So there are a few things which are pretty critical to areas of need within Australia, which are getting it, which is fantastic. This budget itself did look at businesses pretty extensively.
Luckily, we've got a few of tourism, some motels along that line. Sort of helps.
For all of you who don't know, watch Nathan's motel updates.
We're up to 15 motels. We did 5 just this week.
So 20.7 billion, I think, is directed towards businesses. So whilst there's a big budget spend, a lot of that, or a big chunk of that, is towards businesses and trying to get the businesses moving to be able to employ more people. So there's an extension of the full temporary expensing, so unlimited deduction for certain asset classes with regards to businesses turning over a certain amount, or turning under a certain amount, I should say. So if you bought, a new factory, a big farming equipment, if you bought a whole bunch of stuff at the motel, did a new fit out, all that type of stuff, it gets expensed. So the government allows you to write it off, your profit and loss, and that's a pretty important thing. So it encourages spending on things like utes, things on equipment, things on building materials, all those elements which confer movement in the economy. They're pushing things towards that and expensing. I actually didn't think they would extend that. I think in the
so if I go
in October, I said they wouldn't.
If I go build my fish farm, I could claim my fish dam now.
You could claim the equipment which is required to keep those fish oxygenated and
safe
growing
with water.
Exactly right.
So a pond.
Yeah, all the elements that come into
the shed for the chicken coop.
The shed for the chicken coop.
Okay.
Yeah, so all those different types of things.
There we go. From farm to plate. That's what we'll be having next. So we're laughing because it's true.
So it's one of those elements where I actually didn't think it would occur. So I thought they would kill it off because we are having a better year. But obviously they're seeing that the private sector does need to continue to spend. So one really interesting financial commentator said today, he said you can look at this budget in a really glossy, sugar rush, big spend way, or you can look at it as something more underlyingly problematic for the wider economy.
The economy's screwed, so we have to. I'm just going lame. We should have this is like technical guy, straight along the line, silly guy, saying a layman term, right? With my mullet, hey.
None of it's advice from your end.
None of it's advice. I'm just a stupid guy with the mullet here, as Michael would say, from out in the heights out at Shelby. So it's our ongoing joke, everyone. But the economy is screwed. Right? If the economy was so great, they wouldn't be printing all this money. It would be able to support itself. The economy is so screwed, they have to do this, which is amazing because it's so screwed, they're going to just have to keep printing more and more and more of this, and they're going to sit there and be like, we've printed too much, we've got a bigger problem, how do we make this debt to go away? So they have to print more and more and more to make it worthless, which all of the people that have got debt, all the people that have accumulated assets, you're going to see massive inflation, you're going to see the people that will be the most impacted, and they never talk about any of these paperworks, not on the media. They're the ones that have got cash in their account, they're losing their purchasing ability, it's the hidden tax, it's a tax, which all this paperwork aside, there's a tax that's killing everybody here, not most, like a lot of us are doing well out of it, but the hidden tax is inflation, and it's important, I think really important, everybody gets their head around how the inflation works, because that's a hidden tax to most people. If you can understand it, you can make massive profit from it. So normally it's the government that's making profit from taxes, but this time everybody can make profit from taxes because you've got things that are going to be inflated away.
So I think also it's important to make a distinction as targeted inflation. So inflation is occurring in CPI, commodities and products, but wages are not getting any sort of benefit from inflation. So that's what you're referring to, in the sense that money in your bank, as things start to increase in price,
you can't spend
can't buy as much, right? So, but they need inflation to kick in. But how do they temper that with inflation, which is going to affect assets and commodities and goods versus your wage? So that's why it's the economy is the focus here.
I had some crypto the other day, right? I don't know if people have been thinking about this a lot lately or not, but I actually had some crypto the other day, and I was thinking, if I was to sell this, I was like, when the market hits a certain point, I'm going to offload this specific type of crypto. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, imagine if it does hit there where it's getting close to. What would I do with the cash now, right? I could have bought a lot more with that cash, right? Let's say it was $10,000, right? Let's say it's $1 million, whatever it is in the crypto figure. I could have bought a lot more for that dollar figure. So now it has to go up higher. And people, that's the problem with inflation, is people are actually getting poorer and poorer because the money is buying them less and less and less options and less choices. But if you have access to the assets then and the commodities, if you want to go buy a car, cars are very expensive items today.
At the moment, they are
very expensive. Everything's expensive. So that's the hidden one. Is the inflation. But you're saying about the economy, some people are looking at it good and some people are looking at it
some people are absolutely right. So there's certainly not one side of the fence everyone's sitting on saying this is fantastic, our economy is going gangbusters. Typically you'll find that budgets, when they spend money, it's one of two times. The economy is going so good they've got to give back and they've got to try and win the election, which this in part is, but the other time is when they've got to kickstart it and they've got to keep it moving. And I think it's the latter, to be honest with you. So a lot of the other measures that we saw in place do help our community, and there are certain things that we could discuss. One of them is SMSF residency requirements have been relaxed. So it used to be the case where if you were overseas or basically out of the country for a period of 2 years, you needed to find either a point of control or power of attorney for the SMSF that you have. So this actually directly affects one of the clients that we're working with now. So it would be good for that person. It's been relaxed to 5 years, so that means you can have some control whilst you're overseas. Again, making the economy and the population a little bit more mobile. For those of you who have businesses, there's now no longer a threshold for the minimum amount of income earned before you have to pay super. So it used to be $450 a month, like if you had a business, like a cafe or something that you have on the weekend, and you have casual staff who earn only a few $100s a month. You didn't have to pay superannuation for them. Now you do.
Really?
So that is a spending pressure on business, depending on how you look at it. But it's also good for the pension side of things for that individual. So if that does apply to you and you are currently earning less than $450 a month at any one particular employer, make sure that after 1 July your superannuation is getting paid. Super guarantee, there's going to be no change. So basically for this year, for all you people like us who work and are receiving superannuation benefits, it's going up to 10%. So there's another pressure on businesses, which was legislated earlier. There was a discussion that maybe they would stop that or slow that, but they haven't. 10% is going up, so it's going to be a little bit more pressure.
10%, wow, that's crazy.
So it's 9.5% to 10% now. So so it's one of those things. They're also making sure that for older Australians, that they can potentially continue working longer. So not that they have to, but they can now. And there's some changes to the work test with regard to how they have to work to be able to contribute to their super funds. So it's a two-speed thing, in the sense that now they don't have to work a minimum amount. They can work odd jobs and do this or whatever it is, and kick into the super fund, salary sacrifice, everything. So incentivizing them to effectively potentially have some part-time participation in the economy, i.e. boosting those numbers again.
If they're working part-time, they wouldn't be paying that much tax anyway. So them being able to put in their super funds is not really helping them either.
No, it's not helping them either, but it means that they have more in retirement when they do come to real retirement. But what it is critical of is to say that, hey, you can work 20 hours in a month and then you can still contribute to your super. So it's useful, right? Because a lot of people want to.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Like they're basically saying we're screwed, right? We're going to encourage people to work longer because you're going to have to, right?
Yeah.
And here's a little incentive for you. We just won't charge you as much tax.
It is one of those things where it was a bit of an odd one, but it came through.
I think it's writing on the wall for in 2022, 2025, we're going to see people working longer. It's like each office, I reckon the office, we're going to have to put palliative care in case, everybody's going to work until they drop. Like, come on, like, that's the world we're living in. It's enslavement. The system's enslavement.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because they do also need, effectively baby boomers and older Australians to leave their homes to make way for new purchases, new developments, changes in density, all those type of things. Like
making them work themselves until they're ready to go. That's really bad.
One really important element that does affect a lot of employees is employee share schemes. So there's a cessation of the employment removed as a taxing point. So basically, it's a fairly complicated thing, but in terms of the taxing points of when you get shares, if you work for a company, they're going to change so they're more lucrative for the individual employee to be able to receive shares and have different deferred taxing points so that they can sell shares, for example, on the way out, doesn't have to be on the way in, all these different types of things, which made it very prohibitive for people to actually onboard shares. What they were having to do is take the shares, sell them immediately just to pay the bloody tax, right? So it's one of my pet hates, that scheme. So that's actually a really good one. So what they're trying to do is ensure that Australian companies can entice and retain talent here, because in the US, these share scheme laws are much more advanced than what we have here, especially the tech space. So it is a really useful thing that they've put in place. So if any of you guys who work for large multinationals and get shares, it is a useful thing for you for sure.
For some reason, we lost our Instagram followers.
Oh, okay. There's a couple of rules which are not super relevant to everyone within the property space, but what they did bring in place, let's bring it up here. For businesses, the ATO early engagement service for first-time foreign investors, small businesses to be able to pause and dispute ATO debt recovery. So I was talking to Nathan earlier about this today, is that they really want to make sure that businesses in no way are hamstrung with obligations that they have, and they're able to reach amicable outcomes with the ATO to reduce the amount of companies which potentially go bankrupt, go under, are no longer able to, effectively pay their obligations, and that changes how they're going to engage in the workforce, and that can affect a large amount of employers. So it all just surrounds everything to do with employment, right? So whether you're thinking about, JobKeeper, home builder, working longer, tax cuts, it's all to incentivize work-orientated activity and spending activity.
So great. Like they want to work with people to keep businesses afloat. They want to work with people to keep jobs afloat. It's amazing. Being in business is an amazing time.
Yeah, absolutely. Being in business, being in any sort of asset class is really, really important, I think, and really useful at this particular juncture.
What other sort of benefits are there from a business? Because I know there's a lot of people here that are business owners and self-employed and whatnot. What other is there any other stuff there for business owners or?
There's a lot of stuff in terms of, pre-existing carryback loss forward rules that they might have. There's some changes to the way in which, obviously, you mentioned that items can be expensed. There's a few things in terms of concessional tax rates for particular types of companies in biotech, medical fields, for example.
What do you mean by that?
So they're having basically a corporate tax box. So saying that your business, let's say, for example, you have Birch Health and you're looking into revolutionary ways to change health outcomes, or biotech space, so, technology-based medical companies. They're boxing those out to 17% in terms of the corporate tax rate, which is basically a 10% haircut, right? So along with
look at that space,
along with the R&D grants that people get, and that you'll be paying very, very little tax. So it's one of those things where you certainly could consider that Australia is trying to position itself to be what would be a global entrepreneur or encourager of biotech and med space, along with the R&D concessions that we have in place.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And what's the business rate now? What's the tax rate now for business?
So at the moment it's at 27.5. It's coming down slowly. There will be a point where it comes down to 26. I think that'll be in future budgets.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about if someone was to do an instant asset write-off? If they were to spend, 200 grand on furniture in the office, let's call it. What's that cap now?
There is no cap.
So if you want to spend $1 million on furniture?
Yeah, so it's called full expensing temporary measure.
Has that been happening for the last year plus?
So in October in 2020, it was extended to be unlimited. That, so during the stimulus measures, it jumped to 150. So it was 30, 150, and they said, hang on, let's just make it uncapped. Let's see what people spend. So again, you go off and you buy a cat.
Cat?
Not a cat.
We just saw cats and dogs at the restaurant.
A cat excavator from Cat.
Oh, a cat excavator, right? Yeah.
And then you go off and you say, hey, well, I'm actually going to go set up a little excavation company. I need to buy a dumper truck. I need to get some staff. I need to get some, what's it called, traffic control measures in place. All that type of stuff is going to be expensible now.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great to know.
I'll let you answer that one.
Which one's that?
Danielle's.
Hi guys, Ridwan, what is the best way to get in contact about a self-managed super fund setup? No advice, of course. Danielle, I'll get someone to hook up a chat with you with Red. So basically, if someone wants to set up a self-managed super fund,
a few steps we've got to go through.
There's a few steps that you need to go through. You need to get some financial advice around, best ways, appropriateness, all that sort of stuff. If you are an experienced investor and you do have skills in it, you know exactly how you want it set up and whatnot, you can bypass a few of those hurdles and go and speak to someone like Ridwan to go and set that up for yourself. But if you would like to, reach out to the team, 1300 367 925, send us an email at admin@binvested.com.au, and one of my team can put you in contact with a strategist that can help build a plan around how your super fund can be and all that sort of stuff. Ridwan would be in the role of setting that up, but generally the step before that is you need to get some advice around the structuring of that. But Danielle's a skilled investor. She knows exactly everything about super funds and whatnot, so I'll put her in contact.
Absolutely.
So Simon asked, any changes to how crypto will be taxed?
Unfortunately not, Simon. So it's still considered a transactional asset where if you were to sell, swap, trade, you will get taxed on a capital gains basis. Obviously, there are a number of clients who have come to us in the last 6 months. We've set up some pretty cool structures to be able to limit the tax, but still give you some access to that at about a 27% rate. So using the corporate tax structure, earning it in a particular type of way, which allows you to trade, limit the amount of tax you're going to pay, because a lot of the crypto elements that people are doing are not long term. So in terms of their investing elements and their investing outcomes are not long term. They tend to be a little bit more short term. So you could be in a position where we set up a structure for you, and that allows you to be able to trade more freely and cap your rate at 27, which is a lot less than the 47%. So what's really important that you do get the advice on crypto. Myself and Nathan have been talking about crypto for a long time, working out ways in which to ensure that people can trade freely and have some long-term use of it. So I think the structure that we've got in place is pretty cool. So we can certainly have a chat about that, Simon. So, but at the minute, in answer to your question, everything is still taxed on a capital gains transaction basis.
Danielle's got a terrific question there. Might be a silly question. That's a great one. Instant asset write-off. Do you have to pay cash for the asset, or can it be financed?
They would love you to finance it. They'd love you to take the debt, and so you can still write it off regardless if you pay cash or finance. So, for example, if you get a car loan or if you get equipment finance loan, it can all be expense, and you can continue to claim the interest expense along the way. You can't write the asset off any further, but the holding costs of that facility can be expensed.
Let's say I bought a car for 100 grand. Let's say I had a business and I made 100 grand this year, and it's coming up to the end of financial year.
And you needed the car for.
And I need the car because it's a ute, and we've got all our building materials that we need for whatever. If we bought a car, we had no money left over, and we had to pay tax on $100,000. If I went out and got a car loan and bought a car for 100 grand,
you have no tax debt.
I wouldn't have to pay tax.
Correct.
There we go.
So that car would come down in value by, in your example, on a corporate rate by $27,500.
That is why you guys all need to speak to Ridwan before the end of the tax season.
Which is coming up,
It's coming up, so we've got about 6 weeks till the end of financial year. Ridwan will be busy. He'll be in lockdown with everybody that he looks after for a couple of months after July 1. However, if you would like to plan, which is very important to plan strategically before the end of financial year, so you can plan. You can't go back to 2020 tax year and change it once the day is come and gone. So important. If you would like to get put in contact with Ridwan, flick us a DM on whatever platform you're watching this from. You can give us an email at admin@binvested.com.au and just put in the heading, Ridwan, want to speak to him, whatever. Put in your contact details and I'll get my team to organise a chat with Ridwan. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to help. Obviously, with the tax season coming up, it is very busy for us, but we're always in touch with new clients, trying to help clients get them on their way from a property point of view, an investing point of view. Obviously, we don't give the advice, but in terms of how your tax orientates around your financial outcomes, it's really important. And things like basic stuff. If you're not buying a house this year or you're out of gas with finance, and your super balance is just below what it could be to start at SMSF or to have even just more money in super to be invested, then you can make some contributions or you can make some salary sacrificing moves which will allow you to do that. There's a whole bunch of different things which don't really need you to waste the money to be able to get some tax advantages. You actually can capitalize on what some of the measures are in place. So we'd love to have a chat with anyone who needs.
It's amazing, like really amazing.
This is the happiest I've seen Nathan in 4 years.
Probably forever. I think I'm the happiest I've ever been.
No, 2013, you're really happy.
I was really happy back in the day, but I'm just the happiest guy ever. Like, I'm so happy I'm growing a mullet. There's so many.
Again, please don't encourage him. We want him to shave it.
I'm going to shave it smaller and smaller. I'm like, it's good. It was last month, it was really big. Now it's smaller. It does look shit house, by the way. I'm going to probably get rid of it at some point soon, but yeah. So many opportunities, right? We've got inflation running rampant. We've got currency creation running rampant. There's so much. I'm just going to say it, like Rid's going to go, please don't, please. It's like, swearing or whatnot, but like this, you need the water, right? Like, there's so much fraud happening, right, in the financial markets, right? There is so much bad shit going on out there. Manipulation. The inflation, right, it is wrong, right? It is wrong. Like, hand on my chest, what they're doing with currency, what they're doing with money printing, it is wrong in so many different ways. But the opportunity is there. We can't change it. It's what we are faced with. We have the option to either understand it and have the best time of our life, or we can sit there and watch Netflix and watch Kim Kardashian and whatever, and then just let this time pass by and not be able to take control of your life. There's a comment there, buy 100 motels and then shave it. I actually had a goal when I had my big beard that I would shave my beard when I hit a certain target. Do you remember what that was back in the day? Yeah, I had a big beard and people thought it was off my head. I grew this beard and I shaved it when something happened. Don't encourage me too much, otherwise I'll keep it there for until I get to the 100 motels. But I
think it's Johan. Sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly. The question is, if you write off a lot of expensive items, will this lower your paper income and cause problems when it comes to getting finance for buying property? So I'm not a finance expert, but generally, because we deal with a lot of finance related questions, generally speaking, those type of one-off depreciables, they sit in a particular column of what would be your profit and loss. And in many circumstances, the banks will add that back in terms of working out what your serviceable income is. Which doesn't necessarily have to marry up with your taxable income, but it's certainly a question for the finance team. If you do have any questions regarding that, definitely ask us and definitely ask them. So it's a really good question to determine whether you should do something or not. If you have an upcoming purchase, a settlement, anything like that, don't spend money, then put yourself in the position where you can't actually get the finance.
You need to have the right team around you. I'd love to see how smart I am. If I did, I probably wouldn't have a mullet. But it's important to have a good team around you, whether it be from a finance perspective, an accounting and structuring perspective, whether it be from a property strategy, whether it be from a overall perspective, from getting assistance from myself and the team at B.Invested. It's important to have the right people around you that, as we can see with our lives, me and Ridwan don't always agree with everything. We have different views, and it's good to get other people's views and do what feels right holistically for your goals and your position and where you're trying to head to in life. So, yeah, like if you think something's going to... A lot of people will just go to their accountant and say, make me pay no tax, and then they can't buy property for 3 years. A lot of people go to their broker and then, they're leaving credits on the table. So it's important to speak to your accountant before the end of the financial year. It's important to speak to your broker and understand how the finance is going to be structured to make sure you've got a happy medium to get the best result from both sides. I noticed Stuart said here they're trying to direct the Hawkesbury flood with a few sandbags. It's busted. For those of you that are from Sydney, you'd see the disaster that happened a few months ago with flooding. It's pretty much saying, we've got a massive flood and a tsunami coming. Let's get a few sandbags and put the beach together. It's like it's not going to hold it back, and that is what is happening with inflation. This budget solidifies everything that we've been seeing for the last 12 months. It solidifies everything from the 3 to 4 years previously that we started talking about with the global financial depression. This depression is an inflationary depression. People feel like they're going to be very, very wealthy right now. If you don't plan and you don't prepare and you don't take the right actions, you don't have the right strategy, you'll be sitting here saying, everything's so great, but I can't afford anything, I'm broke as hell.
Or the reverse, everyone around you will feel like they're getting very wealthy, and you may not, because if you have a lot of money in the bank and it's not deployed, it can certainly be a problem.
Yeah. Someone said, can someone top up Birchie's water? The jug's behind the computer, so I'm not going to fill it up. So, cool. And how does someone take you seriously with the mullet? I love it. Yeah, look, it's I don't know, take me serious, don't take me serious. That's the fun part about it, because I just say things as they are. I do what I want, I live life on my terms, do what I want, how I want, when I want. Someone here said a shout out to Bill Gates. Let's give him a shout out, everyone. Shout out however you wish. I'm sorry, Rid, because I know you like the bloke, and I don't. I despise the guy.
I like his philanthropy.
Okay. See, we don't always agree.
So look, if there's any other measures in the budget that you'd like to discuss or understand, it is a big one, so we can't cover everything. The Treasurer's speech himself was only 25 minutes. There are a few different things for social security measures, welfare measures, mental health care measures, and some of those things have been really underfunded for a long period. So if there are measures that you need to access, then certainly get in touch with your accountant, us, or the relevant bodies in place. There's a lot of temporary measures for flood, fire, bushfire affected businesses. So again, if that's happened to you, we certainly wish you all the best, and hopefully everything's coming good. But there are a lot of measures in place to ensure that you can get back on track. And as I mentioned, there's targeted spending for hospitality, tourism, aviation, a lot of those different regional businesses as well.
A lot of people actually think that there's a few packages out there. You've got JobKeeper, JobSeeker, Homemaker, Home Builder, whatever they are, Job Trainer. You've got some childcare rebates and stuff like that. A lot of people will look at the budget and just go, okay, cool, this is all that there is in the year. But what a lot of people don't realise is that, as you said beforehand, there's estate budgets, there's incentives there to help stimulate other areas of the business economy. There's literally... Would it be fair to say, I don't know this one, so I'm going to consult with Rid here, would it be fair to say that there could technically be like thousands, like 10,000, 20,000 different sort of incentives and like benefits out there for like grants and support that you can get for your business if you're in a business or whatever?
So the quantum of how many available grants or stimulus measures there are is not super important, because there's more than one person could ever on board.
That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of people just look at the budget and go, "Oh, this is it."
Yeah, no, there's a lot of state measures in place. So, for example, all the people getting the Dine wine and dine vouchers or whatever they're called. That's a state measure. That's not from the federal government. That's from New South Wales. There's going to be a few more coming out that we've got a little bit of heads up on.
Traineeship grants.
There's traineeship grants here. There's traineeship grants on a state level as well.
People that are misfortunate, if they work for 19 hours a week,
absolutely.
their salary. You can get up to like 28 grand or something per year for supporting like someone that's been on long-term unemployment.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different measures in place. So for example, the training, I think they're opening up 5,000 new trainee positions for new skill sets, for relearning for people who've been employed previously before the pandemic or during the pandemic, and subsequently potentially after JobKeeper let go, and they might have to retool, reskill, right? So there's a few measures in there. So again, there's a lot of stuff that we could certainly cover, but a lot of the things which you'll find will come through other work. So you'll get, your tax cuts when they come in a couple of years. You'll get your $1,080 from the government when we do the tax returns for a lot of clients. Childcare subsidies will automatically get into place. So the money will start flowing in. You'll see it, you'll feel it.
Yep.
It's now what you do with it, right? And if
it's a deposit for another house.
If it's a deposit for another house, or depending what it would be, Josh Frydenberg just wants you to spend it. He doesn't care on what, he wants you to spend it. So it is really important that, again, you do certain things, as Nathan said, so you don't watch everyone else sort of change and go by, that actually affects you and your family as well.
I've got no tattoos on my body.
I certainly don't.
Ridwan doesn't either. I was thinking of getting JobKeeper around here. I'm thinking of getting Frydenberg down my arm because they are the gift that keeps on giving. We're talking about it being unusual for a Liberal government to hand out so much money.
It certainly is.
Like, this isn't even the government. This is global. Like, it doesn't matter which person is on the stage. They are having to be forced to give out said measures just to keep this, I would call it a Ponzi scheme. One would say the financial market, and disregard what I just said. But as far as this system, they have to keep doing that. And like, great work. I will give a personal shout out to people go, oh, hi Mum, I'm on TV. Hi, and thank you very much for all your support, Frydenberg, for everybody. And
it wasn't a bad budget. It was
amazing.
It was good.
It's
budget.
amazing. Just keep printing.
I didn't
money.
like the previous budget, to be honest with you. I thought this budget would be different, but I think it's a good budget, to be honest with you. It's a bit of a sugar rush, and I think they have to keep topping it up. When you finish your ice cream, you've got to keep putting sauce, chocolate
it's like a hangover. You just got to keep drinking it, otherwise you're going to be passed out or whatever. You just keep having that.
I wouldn't know that one, but
you don't know that one, but
but like anything in life, if you continue to sort of, I think you said it actually, if you start to give to people, it's very difficult to take back. And so we're seeing it being delivered in different ways, whether it's directly, indirectly, subsidies and otherwise. So what you've said over the years has a lot of it's come to fruition. In terms of the total debt profile of Australia, I certainly hope we don't get to $3 trillion.
I hope. Red doesn't like that. I loved it. Right, bring it on. Make all of our debts. If someone wants to see their debt go to zero, just hope and pray that the government gets itself into a bigger mess, the economy gets even more screwed, they're going to print, they're going to give bigger budgets next year, they're going to give more incentives out there, and it will make your debt worthless. No advice, obviously, on that front, but I believe...
That's the intent. I saw a couple of questions, Danielle, so certainly we do. We'd love to have you on board.
So Danielle asked, Ridwan, do you guys have the capacity to take on new accounting clients?
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly would. And so if anyone else does want to come on board or have a chat with us, and certainly love to do that, and I'll get Nathan and the team to reach out to you, Danielle. I think they went to do that last time, so we'll get in touch. Yeah,
I'll make sure tonight I'll send an email to the team to hook up a chat, or I might actually just send you an email, both of you together, to hook up a chat to see how you can help each other, how you can help her. Any changes to capital gains, Jenna asked?
No. So unfortunately, no, but fortunately also no changes to negative gearing.
Okay.
So whilst we don't promote negative gearing per se as a means, typically the negative gearing is largely directed at investors, and so any changes to that would be a direct change sort of for investors and their profile. So no changes to capital gains tax in the state budget. You might see some discussion around the changes to stamp duty, so either the land tax or stamp duty model, but in this particular scenario, no changes to capital gains tax.
Awesome.
Nate Sheridan asks, buying expenses on property, Can you explain what can be claimed? So typically a lot of the transactional costs in terms of
The borrowing, I mean borrowing.
Oh, borrowing expenses, sorry. Yeah. So in terms of borrowing expenses, all the obviously interest can be claimed as a part of the maintenance of the property. Sometimes you have, mortgage discharge fees, mortgage surge fees. They can be claimed. Stamp duty and all those type of things cannot be claimed. But a lot of the borrowing expenses can be claimed. So if you have any questions regarding that taxation treatment of those borrowing expenses, we're more than happy to help. If you've got LMI, those type of things, sometimes they can have reasonably good tax benefits.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rid. Thank you. Thank you, Rid. Thanks for tuning in and having us as a part of your Wednesday night evening. Just as a bit of a final thing, last week I got really ill. I'm still very nasally congested, and I was too sick. I lost my voice and everything. So I couldn't do last week's webinar, Wednesday webinar last week. So that will be held tomorrow night. The details, you'll be able to find them. If you don't, message the team, they'll hook you up with the webinar. But the webinar will be on tomorrow evening. I think it's 7 o'clock. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure it's 7 o'clock. So I will see everybody tomorrow night for a webinar talking about risk and assessing risk and minimising risk from all different aspects. There's all different elements of risk that surround wealth and building wealth. So with it, that's what we talk about tomorrow. So I'll see you there. And if you need any help, you want to speak to Ridwan, hit us up, admin at binvested.com.au, flick us a DM, call us 1300 367 925. And once again, Rid, thanks a lot for being a gentleman.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for tuning on.
And unlike a lawyer or whatever, he's not charging us by the minute here because we've taken one of the mid-hours. So
no, it's our pleasure. We're more than happy to help always.
So thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks,
Bye
guys.
now.